Good afternoon. I'm Jillian Black, and welcome to the Department of Family and Support Services Criminal Justice Legal Services Initiative, RFP. Joining me today is Lisa Hampton and Rosanna Riley with Youth Services, as well as Mark Sanders II and Lauren Doss with our Human Services Department. Just a few housekeeping rules. Due to the volume of participants, everyone has been placed on mute. Please submit questions via the question box, and we'll respond to questions at the midpoint and end of the presentation. Please use the question box to notify us of any technical issues. Please be advised this webinar is being recorded. Anything stated at this webinar is not intended to change the solicitation document. Any changes will be in writing in the form of an addendum issued by the Department of Family and Support Services. The purpose of this webinar is to provide information for the solicitation. A copy of the recording will be posted on the DFSS YouTube channel with a link to the recording and a PDF to the PowerPoint slides. DFSS retains the right to share a list of registrants to this webinar along with their contact and organizational information at our discretion. Just a couple of things on the agenda. We just went through the welcome and introductions. We're going to go through the purpose, background, information about the scope and program description, selection criteria, timeline, technical assistance for applicants in e-procurement, and then another round for questions. And now that we've gone through the general rules and agenda, I'll now hand it over to the program team to discuss details regarding this RFP.
Afternoon. Thank you, Jillian. I'm Lisa Hampton. I'm the Director of the Prevention and Intervention Portfolio in the Youth Services Division, and I will be walking you today through the purpose of the RFP, requirements, current requirements, and sort of steps in order for you to be able to apply for this opportunity. I want to say up front in the RFP, it does list Lauren Doss as the contact here, but I will serve as the contact for questions in this RFP, and we will also make that change in the amendment that will get posted. Currently, this project sits within the Youth Services Division, but with the release of this RFP, it will be managed and handled by our wonderful colleagues down in our Workforce Division, Human Services. And so please note that you will be engaging with several of us in regards to questions, but also if you are selected as an applicant, know that you'll be working closely with Youth Services as well as with Workforce as we transition this program to their division. So I want to run through the purpose of the RFP. So the purpose of this Criminal Justice Legal Services Initiative is to solicit proposals from qualified organizations who exhibit expertise in providing legal aid services in community outreach and education to assisting youth and adults in Chicago. This RFP is focused on the needs and challenges associated with having a criminal record, and the primary components of this program will provide legal services to clients, including consultation and direct representation for specific legal matters. I want to note that this program is limited in scope. There is more information in the RFP about those things, but our primary focus here is that we are looking for individuals to address legal matters that are limited to representing clients post-adjudication or disposition for juvenile expungement, adult sealing, cannabis expungement, resolving certain warrants for clients seeking other eligible covered services here. This applies only to warrants for nonviolent misdemeanors and other criminal record reliefs for adults. Please note, this webinar does not serve and should not serve as your only way to understand this RFP. We strongly urge that you read the entire RFP for all details and history related to this, to what we've done in the past and what we are proposing moving forward. Next slide. Thank you. For a quick background, so this particular project, which has currently been known as the Community Justice Initiative, was started in 2017. and launched in 2018 and was really focused on servicing community areas that were within the Black Caucus wards. In the and was totally focused primarily on Know Your Rights training, and making sure that we were doing workshops as well as education around those areas. In 2019 and into 2020, we decided at that point to include civil and criminal legal services as an additional service component, which is how we are currently operating through today. This new RFP takes those components and basically allows us to drill down on the legal services side as a primary focus, and then also continuing the education portion of our current activities. Next slide. So we want to give a little bit of background on program outcome statistics. As I stated before, our current model is just primarily focused on Know Your Rights training. So most of our workshops, most of our goals is around sort of workshops and how many individuals that we've touched in this area. So from here, 2019 through 2022 is information about our workshops. So the Know Your Right workshops, our primary focus when we started was about 20,000 individuals that we were looking to serve at least. And then post-COVID, we lowered the number to about 16,000. Once again, this RFP does cover Know Your Rights workshops and other workshops, but the primary focus here will be on legal services. Next slide. The goals of the RFP is to ensure that Chicagoans residing in community areas impacted by COVID-19 pandemic have access to legal aid services and community education to help alleviate barriers to employment, housing, and education. This initiative is administered by DFSS, but it is also partly funded by the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA dollars. So consequently, all guidelines and requirements for DFSS as well as the American Rescue Plan must be met in this RFP. This includes, but is not limited to, requirements related to allowable activities and cost, cash management, reporting, eligibility, and including and maintaining a valid SAM government registration. Our current state. So the current state and our priorities for improvement. This is an area where we will review what we've currently been doing and what we anticipate or what we'd like to see in applicants and in our program services side. As I stated at the initiative launch, services really focused that were really focused on individuals that were in police custody, that were facing criminal charges on probation and parole, formerly incarcerated, returning citizens, and all other persons or organizations that advocated on behalf of this population. We've historically had 4 delegate agencies who were able to able to provide education and Know Your Rights workshops and connect to wraparound services and supports. In addition to that, we had 13 subcontractor organizations that provided outreach, referrals to legal service agencies for legal representation, and Know Your Right workshops in each participating ward. Our current state, or based on the work that we've been doing since 2018, these are some of the main areas that we refined in this current RFP. So for current providers, you'll notice that these are the new requirements for this program, and you have to meet the new requirements for this program, and we'll actually go into program requirements in future slides. But one of the things that is different in this new RFP to our current services is the refinement of the target area and population. So DFSS is expanding services to more vulnerable community areas across the city of Chicago through this opportunity. While the previous RFP really focused on the south and west side of the city and primarily Black Caucus wards, this RFP will focus on qualified census tracts and COVID-19 community vulnerability index communities. In your RFP, those community areas are attached as an amendment, as an appendix, and is also listed under the current state and priority improvement section of your RFP area. This will bring us to a total of this project serving 56 community areas of the 77 in the city of Chicago. Another area of change in this RFP is that we are creating a comprehensive legal safety net for Chicagoans. And what we've, in our research here, in doing the research for this RFP, we know that legal consultation often results in justice-involved youth and adults learning about criminal records related issues for the first time. So we wanted to be able to provide criminal records support, as well as not only from an education standpoint, but from a legal services side. And we know this because criminal records impact an entire household, and many are not aware that they even qualify for legal assistance or what services are available to them. So adults with a criminal record may be prohibited from utilizing certain services, such as social services, including even welfare and health benefits, public housing, and food stamps. And so this project does focus on adults and youth and families, which is a much broader stroke than the current Youth Services Division can provide. And lastly, we wanted to prioritize continuous improvement, focused on data collection, analysis, and program quality. As criminal justice services are deeply tied to sensitive information such as police records and data, DFSS has historically been limited in how we can capture information here. So we want to be clear for any applicant here, the process, that there will be a robust data collection and analysis and program quality plan in place to ensure that we are capturing data referencing community education and outreach, anything related to support services and safety net, and the status of individuals' cases as they are filed. Next slide. These are the targeted community areas, which are divided by zone. So within your RFP, this is under section C, program requirements. There is also, it's also listed once again as an appendix as part of your RFP document that's online through a supplier. We have 5 zones here: far south, near south, north central and northwest, southwest and west zone. These are the community areas that must be served through this RFP, and questions related to the zone that you select must address the needs of the community areas that have been identified here on this slide and in section C of the RFP. Next slide. Program requirements. So once again, this is section C of the RFP. And I'm just going to walk through everything that's there. But once again, I strongly urge people to read the actual RFP for more information. We are looking for respondents who can address the following legal matters with client post adjudication and disposition. That includes the following: juvenile expungement, adult sealing, cannabis expungement, resolving certain warrants for certain clients seeking other eligible coverage services, and other criminal record reliefs for adults. Next slide. What do we mean by legal assistance activities? And so legal assistance activities include intake, interview, and clarification of legal questions, legal research on behalf of the client, education concerning legal rights, including community education and workshops, advocacy to secure needed and entitled benefits, representation in court and in hearings by a licensed attorney at law or a trained paralegal and or law student. As clients are screened for criminal legal services, we know a majority may need assistance with additional civic issues. This initiative will provide various civic supports, including but not limited to child support, curfew violation, employment, specifically wage theft, employment rights or background check issues, healthcare background check waiver, housing, specifically looking at evictions and utility assistance or advocacy, public benefits, SNAP, WIC, and Medicaid, school suspensions and expulsions, and all legal referrals will be screened prior to case acceptance. The metrics for this particular RFP are that 60% of juvenile records will be that are looking to be expunged. We're looking to improve long-term access to housing, employment, and a livable wage, reduce barriers to employment, increase access to legal counsel for justice-involved youth. 40% of eligible adult cases that are resolved. We are looking at reducing barriers to employment, improving long-term access to housing, employment, and a living wage, and increasing access to legal counsel for justice-involved youth, adults. And then 60% of youth and adults that will report it increased in knowledge and access to legal services due to attending a Know Your Rights workshop, increasing knowledge for youth and adults about their rights in encounters with police and accessing legal counsel. Program outputs for this overall, we are looking to serve 12,000 individuals to attend a Know Your Rights workshop. That's roughly 2,000, about 2,400 attendees per zone. So once again, you are applying by zone. And so as you put together your budget and you put together other activities here, you need to be thinking about the 2,400 attendees for your zone for your Know Your Rights training. 3,600 cases will be screened for legal services. Once again, if that's by zone, that's about 720 cases need to be screened. And 1,200 legal cases accepted. So that's about 240 cases accepted per zone. Performance and outcomes. This is more detail based on the numbers that we talked about earlier. And this is once again from a monitoring point. These are more metrics for us that we will be looking at. So legal services, the number of legal services that are, this is primarily for individuals who are chosen. This is where the data collection piece and having the ability to collect data is going to be really critical in order to ensure that you're meeting the needs here. And you'll need to demonstrate in your responses in the application how you're going to be able to meet the data collection needs and know that you're on track towards the data. So legal services, we're going to be capturing and looking at metrics related to the number of legal screenings completed and the number of cases accepted for representation. Once again, we know that some of these things are dictated clearly by law. And so, but we want to make sure that everyone understands and is able to show efforts around being able to provide legal screenings and of those that are and what cases are eligible to be moving forward. Number of legal services provided by type. So we'll be asking individuals to ensure that they're able to disaggregate data as it relates to juvenile expungement, adult sealing, cannabis expungement, warrants, and bonds for other criminal relief for adults. Number of non-legal services or consultations provided by type. Once again, we know that in doing Know Your Rights training, other efforts and or trainings that individuals or applicants may do may surface other services that individuals need, such as school suspension and expulsion, wage theft, wrongful termination, truancy and curfew violations, healthcare background check waivers, child support and assistance in obtaining public benefits and public housing. And lastly, the amount or court fees or legal costs averted by clients. Once again, we are funding this partly with federal dollars, and we want to show that the support and the financial resources we are providing here are actually impacting communities, but also individuals. So we will be asking individuals to indicate what and the amount of court fees and legal costs that we've averted by having the service in place for individuals so that they can be able to have more access to things like employment, education, and housing. And then on the education and outreach side, on the education and outreach side, we want to clearly know the number of Know Your Rights workshops provided and the number of workshops attendees. In addition to where they're coming from. So we may be asking for things such as zip code and or that you're able to capture that information and you have a mechanism to do that. Sorry, next slide. What is the selection criteria that we will be using in order to evaluate each of these? So I want to be clear that the process here at the city is that we evaluate each application within each zone, so that you are competing with everyone else who is applying for that application in that zone. We use a standard criteria with scoring that is also identified and clearly broken out in the RFP under basis of award section and performance review. We have 5 areas that we'll walk through today. The first being community involvement. One of the things that we're going to evaluate all applicants are the following: that the respondent or the applicant demonstrates a clear understanding of their zone for services as it relates to the adult and youth population in legal services. This includes their strengths and assets and needs and challenges. The respondent demonstrates a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and access to legal services and legal education. The respondent's leadership reflects and engages the diverse people of the community it serves. Next slide. The second criteria is organizational capacity. What structure do you have in place that allows you to be a candidate to be able to execute the services here? And this includes that there's a plan to hire and retain qualified legal and educational staff that have the legal knowledge regarding juvenile expungement, adult expungement, cannabis expungement, sealing, and warrants. Please note that this is an opportunity that for us to provide a high level needs service for individuals in the community. And we want to know that applicants are providing qualified individuals to engage in this service with them. And understanding of the current law as it relates to all of the things is really important here. So being able to demonstrate in your responses what your experience is and being able to deliver these services, and that you understand what the current law is and how you keep up with current law will be critical in your responses here. In addition, the respondent has to have adequate systems and processes to support monitoring legal case progress, program expenditures, and fiscal controls. Strength the proposal program. This is the largest portion of the applicant scoring, and this is the way that we will evaluate all of the applications that we see. That the applicant or respondent describes a minimum of 2 years performing legal services on a community level. This is once again critical because we want to ensure that, because we are dealing with individuals on the ground who already have vulnerability and other challenges here, we want to ensure that any interaction they're having with any of our applicants or that are chosen awardees, that they have the skill set to be able to execute these services successfully. So you must be able to mention any specific background or training in expungement law, and can cite the number of cases if the people have filed cases in the past that have been filed and in which areas. Respondents also need to be able to explain their history in delivering workshops, including Know Your Right workshops. Respondents also need to provide details about how the agency keeps up with current legislation and legal remedies in Illinois, and how training are updated to reflect these changes. So once again, training not only how they're going to do training, what's the deliverable system. I also would stress here that people need to also considering things, our ask here is that these services are done in person. But if people also will need to be able to respond about how they would perform these services if they're virtual. We understand the nature of basically the world, in that given our experience in having to do these services during COVID, we also know that people can provide these services virtually. If you have that ability and you have experience doing that, here's the opportunity for you to be able to demonstrate how you would do this in a virtual setting as well. But I want to stress that the goal here is that all of these services are done in person, in community. The respondent clearly defines services. So legal education is one, and then also can provide and what they can provide through either a partnership or linkages agreement with other agencies that are appropriate to addressing the needs and achieving desired outcomes. The respondent has an effective outreach strategy in approaching to identifying clients through outreach, education, social media platforms, and community events. The respondent has partnerships or coordinates with other agencies to expand or improve services in a client-centered, comprehensive way, which connects clients to any ancillary services beyond legal services. Fourth criteria is performance management and outcome. And in this area, the applications will be evaluated based on the following: that respondent provides data about the proposed program or a similar program that describes the evaluation of the program outputs and evaluation of outcomes outlined in the performance measurement section of the RFP. A note here is that what we are looking for is that individuals look at the actual performance measures from this RFP and be able to demonstrate where and in the past you've been able to meet similar, if not the same, performance management criteria. I want to point that out, that one of the biggest mistakes people make here is just putting random data from any performance thing related that's not tied to the actual RFP. The link here is being able to provide outcome and performance data that is similar or to what we are providing here, or is linked in some way. Legal services, public education, dealing with individuals around connecting them to ancillary service supports. The second bullet is just being able to describe like evaluation. So for example, in-person or online surveys, how you plan to implement that, how you implement with legal clients and workshop attendees, and also describe how your data is utilized to inform services. How are you using feedback from individuals that you are providing training and workshops to inform the way that you update the workshops that you provide? And respondents demonstrate the ability to leverage data and identify areas of improvement. Lastly, that the respondent has experience using data to inform or improve its services of practice. Once again, this relates to the two parts of this RFP, the legal services or legal representation side, as well as the know your rights side. So make sure all of your answers to questions here address both parts of the RFP. Next slide. Lastly, reasonable cost, budget justification, and leverage of funds. The respondent has the fiscal capacity to provide legal services and education through a reimbursement structure. We want to know, we give you a range here in the RFP for what you can apply for, and we want to know why you chose that range, why the budget that you provide for us as part of your required documentation. Why is the budget structured the way it's structured? And what are the things that you're prioritizing in your budget along the way? So we want to know that you have the fiscal capacity to be able to do this. Please note the City of Chicago works on a reimbursement structure, so you must upfront cost at the beginning and then bill us monthly in order for you to be able to capture, in order for you to be able to recoup funds. And so being able to be explicit about what that structure looks like in lieu of city payment at the beginning and the start of this program. The respondent leverages other funds and in-kind contributions to support the total program and administrative cost for this programming, and that the respondent demonstrates reasonable implementation cost and funding that reflects services and staffing necessary to operate the program. The proposed budget supports the proposed scope of work or work plan. Please note in your RFP, under the budget section, we've provided more information about the budget process, how to put the budget together. The budget should be based on the cost per community area. And so, for example, here, I just want to point out that our goal here is to serve, once again, a total number of individuals, 12,000 across this project. But you should put a budget together for your zone based on the criteria under the budget project, based on the following: 2,400 attendees per zone, 720 screened for legal services, and 240 cases accepted. So once again, for more information about how to put the budget together, that is in the RFP under the requirements sections, section C, under program budget. Next slide, thanks. There are requirements, once again, that for this RFP that we just want to make sure that you're aware of and that you're able to attach in order for you to have a complete application that we can review. We want to make sure that in some areas we give you the opportunity to attach financial audits, financial reports, job descriptions. The budget is a required document that you must attach here. So be sure to attach your reports or studies or any other documentation around performance and clearly label those. Be sure to attach the resume for key staff that are overseeing this project. And here it will be either for lawyers, paralegals, law students, and individuals who will be managing your outreach staffing. And be sure to attach your organizational budget and be sure to label that, and any other program requirements here. Two things I would say in this section just to be mindful of is when you are answering the questions in the performance area, please do not reference, please see any attached documents. As reviewers, we're not allowed to go to additional attachments in order to help you, in order to evaluate whether or not you've answered that question. So just to make sure that you answer the performance data questions in the space allotted, and that anything you attach afterward is just that an additional attachment, but it cannot be used to help evaluate whether or not you answered the written portion of the application question. Next one, next slide, thanks. Evaluation process. Once again, we are evaluating on the strengths of the proposal and the responsiveness to the selection criteria. You are, we're reading everyone individually and then grading accordingly. And then you're basically in competition with everyone else who files within that area. So I strongly encourage people here to work in partnership in order to figure out who's providing services, who's interested in potentially applying, and figuring those things out in order to strengthen your applications. Failure to submit a complete proposal or respond to any requirements that we may follow up with in a timely manner would mean that we would file your thing under either incomplete or reject your application totally and would not review it. The commissioner, upon review, may reject or deny recommended agencies that have applied for grants based on previous performance and or area need. And that DFSS reserves the right to ensure that all mandated services are available citywide, which we already within this RFP are looking to do, and ideally by zone and provided in a linguistically and culturally appropriate manner. Next slide. Next slide. Selection and transition timelines. We are doing this pre-proposal webinar today. We will post an amendment next week in order for us to be able to provide any more information in regards to changes in this RFP proposal. If you have any questions, we'll answer questions here online. But if you have any potential questions that are that come up afterwards, you can feel free to let us send those directly to me by June 12th, and then we will close this application on Thursday, July 11th, 2024 at noon, and that our program period ideally would start Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. Budget or cost proposals, just some things to keep in mind. Once again, you should put your budget together as if it is for a year, so the full cost of that. But we also want to make sure that if you are chosen as an awardee, it will be prorated based on the terms of this, the terms of the grant this year. So please put together your budgets based on a full year of service. But the budget term for this year will be September 1 of 2024 through December 31st of 2025, and with an option of one additional year. There is a 10% in-kind match, once again, and then a 15% administrative cap. All of these things are listed under the budget section in the RFP for more details. Once again, please submit a budget for 1 year or 12 months of service. Cost categories definitions are attached as part of the budget instructions in the RFP. Do not, if you are a current provider, do not use any other budget form other than the one that is part of this RFP. Do not use your current budget forms. Do not use any of your current information from DFSS. There is a budget form that is specific to this RFP that is part of this application. That is what we will review. Please use that budget form in order for you to be able to submit for this RFP. Be thoughtful and inclusive when developing your budget. And generally, you know, we cannot give you more money than what you ask sometimes, but just be reasonable about what you really can think services can, what services you can provide, and what the real cost is going to be on that end. And just being able to be reasonable, and once again, being able to justify that in your written part of your application. Next slide. Common budget mistakes we see on budgets are fringe. Individuals, just make sure that you check your calculations on their supplies. They're often either frequently under budget or very, very over budget here. And thinking about supplies from the sense of what you will need for your Know Your Rights trainings, as well as what you'll need as you're thinking about legal representation and direct services. Client assistance, there really isn't, we do not expect a lot of client assistance dollars here, other than maybe transportation and things of that nature, unlike some of our other RFPs are in place. Because ideally, if people have additional needs, you'll be connecting them to additional ancillary services. But if there are additional costs, you'll just be able to need to justify that and to how it relates to the two outcomes in this RFP. And then just make sure that you use the appropriate columns. There's a column for your share, the grant share, which is what you are asking the city to pay. And then there's a column for your share, which is where you will identify your match. And then there'll be a total column, the total budget program cost. Just make sure that you put your information in the right column. Next slide. And then once again, applications are due July 11th, 2024 at noon Central Time. And I want to be clear, I would strongly suggest that people try to upload at least 3 hours, start your upload process at least 3 hours before. Sometimes the machine is wonky. Depending on how your system is, it may bump you off. And so you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time to upload the documents, make sure that you can double check and everything else. The system does cut you off at noon. So it's not 12:01, it is at noon. So what I tell people is try to get your RFP in before noon and to start early and saved often so that you ensure that everything will upload. And so there is nothing we can do on our end. If you are in the middle of an upload and the clock turns noon, then your proposal will not be taken, and there is nothing we can do on our end. There is no appeal process, and we will not take documents any other way other than in the system that when you upload.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
And I would like to stress that saying that she said, start early and save often. It's very important to do so. Just a couple of application tips. If you have never done business with the City of Chicago, please register into iSupplier, also known as eProcurement ASAP. Review RFP narratives and application questions closely. Remember, they align with the scope and selection criteria. Use the information in the RFP for guidance in formulating your answers. There is a 4,000 character limit, which includes punctuation and spaces. Each response is allotted 4,000 characters. Do not use the back button on your browser, whatever you do. More tips for working in e-procurement. 2, submit multiple applications for a single RFP. Applicants will need to set up a unique user account in iSupplier. The e-procurement system is not capable of submitting more than one distinct proposal per associated email address. Therefore, you must use a separate email address for each submission. You can submit your application and later amend it up until the due date of July 11, 2024. Remember the due date time is 12 noon. Avoid the rush and possible mishaps by submitting early. Plan on submission taking 30 to 60 minutes. Please be advised that late applications cannot and will not be accepted. For any assistance via e-procurement, please reach out to the hotline for help at 312-744-4357. Please note that the hotline operates during business hours only, which is Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 p.m. And again, save often and submit early. Just want to introduce the new Labor Peace Agreement Ordinance. It went into effect this April 2024. It will apply to all DFSS and CDPH delegates that have 20 or more employees working for their organization. The only exemption is it does not apply to hospitals. And it applies to all contracts that are entered into after April 17, 2024. Contractor must provide written notice to the commissioner or her designee within 72 hours of becoming aware that employees want to organize or that a union seeks to represent employees. Contractor must enter into an LPA within 90 days of receiving notice from a labor organization that it represents or seeks to represent employees. What is an LPA? The LPA is an agreement between an employer and a labor union that ensures that an organizing drive is not impacted by union busting techniques, including employee retaliation, and in return, they will not strike or stop work in any way that will impact human services. This new labor peace agreement ordinance is in the RFP in the additional requirements. New agency requirements. Outside of the LPA, we have to provide articles of incorporation and any amended articles of incorporation. We also have to include an IRS affirmation letter, and this is for non-for-profit agencies only. This letter must be dated within 60 days of submittal. You can attain this by calling the IRS directly at 1-877-829-5500. If you are a for-profit agency, please submit your original letter from the IRS showing your FEIN number. A DUNS number is also required, as well as a Central Contractor Registration, CCR. Please provide a copy of the entity overview page on the www.sam.gov website. Lastly, a certificate of good standing letter with the state of Illinois is required. And for technical assistance, there is a link on the DFSS webpage to the RFP, or will be a link to the RFP of interest in training documents. See alert section in our website. For questions on registration and e-procurement, please reach out to customer support at cityofchicago.org, or please feel free to call 312-744-4357. Training materials, documents, and videos can also be found on the website under online training materials. Now we're going to discuss entering responses and accepting amendments. Step 1 for entering a response in eSupplier. Select Create Quote from the drop-down menu in the Actions box and click on Go. This will take you to the application page where you can get started. In the RFP you are interested in has been amended. You will need to acknowledge and accept the amendment by start or submit a response. To accept the amendment, click on View Amendment History. To begin the acceptance and acknowledgement process, please follow these steps after clicking View Amendment History. Number 1, you must click on the document number. Next, you click on the infinity or eyeglass icon to review the amended changes to the RFP. Number 3, click on the Acknowledge Amendments button to acknowledge receipt and understanding of these changes and proceed. By acknowledging the amendment, you are indicating that you are aware of the changes made to the RFP in the amendment. Step 3 of how to accept an amendment. When you get to this screen, click on the I accept box and then click on Acknowledge. After you click on Acknowledge, you can click on Yes to indicate that you confirm your acknowledgement of the amendment. Finally, click on the checkbox that you accept the terms and conditions, and then click on Accept to actually accept them. This is the final step in acknowledging and accepting an amendment. Now we're going to discuss how to submit the application once you've accepted and acknowledged the amendment. When you are ready to submit, you start by saving your draft one last time and then click Continue. If you are missing any information, F&PS will give you an error message at the top of the page. Please see example here. Usually the error message directs you to something left undone in the application. In the last example, the error message indicated that the lines found under the Lines tab had not been filled out. In this example, the error is about an unanswered question in the application or the requirements section. The quote value refers to your, in this case, missing answer. Once your application is free from errors, you are ready to proceed and submit. At this point, clicking continue should put your application into the review and submit phase. This is your last chance to review all of your data and confirm that it's accurate. Check your attachments and scroll to the bottom of the screen to see all of your responses. At the bottom of the screen, you will be asked to provide an electronic signature. Please be sure to fill in the signature box before checking the box. Lastly, you can finally submit. Make sure that you see this submittal confirmation screen. The e-procurement system will send a confirmation email within 24 hours of your submission. Please feel free to call or email me if you desire confirmation prior to then. Any questions? I see that Lisa is currently answering the question, and we also had 5 others earlier in the presentation that were answered. Again, all of the questions and answers will be entered into the amendment and posted.
Correct. And I'm happy to just to run through them really briefly. The last one was about the certificate of good standing. And it is within the RFP section about where you can do that is through the Secretary of State in Illinois. But I will double check and I will provide a final response in the amendment. So to Jillian's point, it is very critical that you click on that, you acknowledge and have read the amendment, because oftentimes the amendment is going to be anything post this meeting that we want to change in the RFP. And it's critical that you read and accept that before you move forward in your RFP responses. But most of the questions we've asked, I think the biggest question I just want to reiterate, because I don't think we stressed it in the presentation, was that you can apply for as many zones as you want. However, for every zone that you want to apply for, it is a separate application. We will not go to another application to find a document, to look at a job description, to look at a budget. Every application is its separate application. And to Jillian's point earlier, it then means that you need a separate email account for every application that you submit. And so you can apply for multiple zones, but that is a separate application for each zone. And the readers will not go to another application to see a document or to see responses. And all of your responses then need to be related to that zone. It cannot be a general RFP that you send for each one, because there are particular questions that we're asking about each zone. So just something that I want to flag for individuals. If you are thinking about applying for multiple zones, we don't have a restriction to that, but it is an application for each zone separately and will be viewed separately within that zone.
Thank you, Lisa. And again, if we have any other questions outside of this webinar, please feel free to contact Lisa Hampton at 312-743-0938. Her email is lisa.hampton@cityofchicago.org. And for non-programmatic questions, please contact the e-procurement hotline. Again, they're open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 p.m. And the number is 312-744-4357. Email is customersupport@cityofchicago.org. Or you can contact me. I'm Jillian Black, and my email is jillian.black@cityofchicago.org. And since we don't have any more questions, this will conclude our webinar. And I hope everyone has enjoyed the rest of your evening. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, and good luck.